Hey guys, this is Mannequin. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but today I want to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is buying microphones. I have bought way too many microphones, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the information I learned along the way and pass it along to you so that you can be empowered to choose a microphone that will work well for you. Now, what we're not going to do today is we're not going to compare a bunch of microphones or say, if you want this sort of tone, get this microphone, or if you want a different kind of tone, get a different microphone. What we're going to do instead is give you a tool that you will actually be able to compare different microphones and pick one that works well for what you want. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use something called AudioTestKitchen. Now, before you immediately just leave the video and discredit everything I've said because you hear the word AudioTestKitchen and you see me pull up a website where I'm comparing microphones, just hear me out for a split second. Let's assume this site is not really a good comparison system and it is completely inaccurate. So what we would see then is if we actually got the microphones side by side in the real world, we would hear different things listening to the site versus listening to the actual microphones in the real world. So that's how it would be if this site was inaccurate. So what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly that. What I have is 4 microphones lined up right here. It's 2 pairs. So we have one pair for one take and another pair for another take. And we're going to see if the conclusions we draw from the actual real world comparison I have of these mics in front of me singing is the same as the conclusions we draw when listening to AudioTestKitchen. If we come to the same conclusions from both of these methods, then that means that AudioTestKitchen is a fair tool to trust. So what we're going to do is we're going to take AudioTestKitchen for now and put it in our back pocket. And we're going to start listening to these different takes that I have and draw some conclusions about what we think these microphones sound like. So we'll start with an easy one first, then we'll go to one that's a little bit harder. So what we're going to do is I'm not going to tell you what these 2 microphones are. That's not important. We're just going to be listening for differences. This was recorded in one take. We have 2 microphones side by side, recorded at the exact same time through the exact same preamps, and I have level matched them as well. We have no processing on top. It is just the raw vocal, and we have a backing track to provide some context. So without further ado, let's start listening. I'm going to flip back and forth between these 2 tracks at random times. I'm not going to annotate it. Just pay attention to it flipping and pay attention to the sound differences you hear and start to formulate opinions.
What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you show your stripes, huntress. I'm an animal in your sights. No, you call my phone on the regular. Can't shut you out, you're a predator. You cut me down, cut me straight to the core. Eat my heart out, got me begging for more. What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you show your stripes, huntress. I'm an animal in your sights. No, you call my phone on the regular. Can't shut you out, you're a predator. You cut me down, cut me straight to the core. Eat my heart out, got me begging for more.
Okay, so now we've taken a listen to those, and you can choose to do one of 2 things. You could either listen along with me, or you can pull up AudioTestKitchen for yourself and listen on AudioTestKitchen. So what we're going to be comparing right now is the Sontronics STC2 and the Slate VMS ML1 with the FG47 emulation. So we're going to listen to this particular vocal. It's not very similar to mine at all, but it's going to be something that will kind of allow us to hopefully hear the same thing. So we're going to listen to these 2, and we're going to see if we could pick out which is which based on what we heard before.
One test, we licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best, lay the weak to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city and you running your lip. I'm about to make a call, get the news van out. Explain to Trisha Toyota on how your crew ran out. We coming live from the Trade 23, area cold, mad clouds of smoke. It ain't no room for snow. L.A. California, Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city and you running your lip. I'm about to make.
Okay, so if you're good at picking up differences in sound, what you could really hear in AudioTestKitchen is the STC2 is very bright compared to the VMS ML1 with the FG47. Now, going back to my recordings and listening side by side to these two, I was picking up the same thing as well. Now, these are very drastically different microphones, and we'll get into that in just a second. But let's go back and listen one more time back in the DAW with what I've recorded to see, if it really stacks up.
What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you show your stripes, huntress. I'm an animal in your sights. No, you call my phone on the regular. Can't shut you out, you're a predator. You cut me down, got me straight core. Eat my heart out, got me begging for more.
So we notice one is very bright and one is very dark. It's a pretty drastic difference, but we're picking up the same thing. Also, one of the things I noticed as well is the dark one has this weird sort of lispy ring kind of to it that I'm not particularly fond of. It sounds like there's a weird peak in the frequency spectrum somewhere that is picking up some sheen sort of sounds where it's like really harsh and wispy in a not great way. And I'm hearing that both here and in AudioTestKitchen. It's a very important thing. So we'll take a listen one more time as we flip between them and listen for the sheen in the duller microphone that kind of comes out every now and then.
Off shots in the west, we make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city and you running your lip. I'm about to make a call, get the news van out. Explain to Trisha Toyota on how your crew ran out.
I think this is a good. There's a spot up here where I heard it pretty distinctly.
Shots in the west, we.
Yeah, right there. In this particular S that is said, it really starts to stick out.
We licking off shots in the west. We make.
It's not necessarily the S that you're hearing in it, but when he says shots, the starts to hiss for some reason.
Believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This test. We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Test. We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Lay the week. Test. We licking off shots in the west.
You hear that kind of high frequency, like it's very weird, but it kind of sticks out to me, and it's not something I particularly like about this particular model microphone. And we're going to actually go into exactly why that is in a second, but let's go back and listen again and see if we can pick up that exact same difference. Once again, we already know which mic is which. Based on the fact that we've listened to two of these, we could hear the drastic difference between these two microphones. So I don't even need to tell you which one is the STC2 and which one is the ML1 because they sound so different and we could already match those differences. But let's look for that really nuanced detail in the ML1 and see if we could pick it up in my recording as well.
What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless.
How, right there. So we're going to listen to that, and we're going to put that on a shorter loop so that we could compare it a little bit better and flip between these two.
Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you shut me down, tell me how I'm useless.
Shut really has it right there. Like, it really sticks out very, very poignantly. So it's really fascinating how well AudioTestKitchen is actually representing these two pairs and the comparison we're making between these two microphones. Now, I think this is an easier one because actually, if we look at the frequency response graphs here, you could see that the Slate FG47 is kind of relatively flat and has a couple peaks, which is probably what we were hearing before. And then if we go to the STC2, it's kind of flat up until around 10K. And then you have like this really big spike, which really explains the difference because this spike is nowhere near as drastic on the FG47. So the frequency response graph kind of, tells us why we're hearing what we're hearing. And there's a huge difference. But let's go to the P220 and the NT1A and compare these side by side, because if we look at their frequency response graphs, they're much more nuanced in their differences. They both have a pretty drastic boost in the high end, but the character of the boost is going to be slightly different. So let's see if we could pick up on that.
What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you show your stripes, huntress. I'm an animal in your sights. No, you call my phone on the regular. Can't shut you out, you're a predator. You cut me down, got me straight to the core. Eat my heart out, got me begging for more. What you do to me, oh, it's ruthless. Shut me down, tell me how I'm useless. Red and white, yeah, you show your stripes, huntress. I'm an animal in your sights. No, you call my phone on the regular. Can't shut you out, you're a predator. You cut me down, got me straight to the core. Eat my heart out, got me begging for more.
So I'm going to be completely honest here. First of all, the difference between these two mics is actually really subtle. And to be completely frank, I actually don't remember which one is which for this particular comparison. So once again, I'm going to hold my opinion. You hold yours as well. Let's listen to AudioTestKitchen's representation of these mics.
We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. Y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city and you running your lip. I'm about to make a call, get the news van out. Explain to Trisha Toyota on how your crew ran out. We coming live from the Trade 23, area cold, mad clouds of smoke. It ain't no room for snow.
I want to go back to here because what I noticed here was the differences that we are hearing with my recordings actually really stood out here.
Young buck in the presence of this, don't even come from my city and you running your lip. Young buck in the presence of this, don't even come from my city and you running your lip. Young buck in the presence of this, don't even come from my city and you running your lip.
So what I was hearing was this microphone sounded like it was brighter and it cut through more, which was kind of nice. But this microphone sounded a lot more balanced and it sounded kind of more natural, even though it still had a bit of air to it, which was kind of cool. So that was kind of my takeaways here. And I'm noticing the exact same thing. Like there's a much more subtle difference, to be extremely clear. Like I really had to listen hard to kind of pick this out. Now, if you had me blindly test these two, I would be able to pick out which is which, and we'll actually have some fun with that later. But for now, let's just think of it like this one was a little bit brighter and this one was a little bit duller. And this one was a little bit brighter and this one was a little bit duller, but it was a very subtle difference. Like this one just sounded a little bit smoother, a little bit more rounded. This one sounded like it was brighter and it cut through more. And let me double check my notes here really quick. So this one was recorded on input 2, which means that it was a microphone I had on the left. So yeah, that means this one was the AKG P220. So we actually have the order is the same for this one. So we had P220 on the left, or the first one, and then the NT1A was the second one. Okay, so we've actually compared all the microphones now, and I think we've kind of come away with the same conclusions when listening to them independently. So if I'm listening to my own microphones that I actually have, and when I'm comparing them, I come to the same conclusions as somebody that would be listening on AudioTestKitchen, I think that speaks very well for AudioTestKitchen. So yeah, I think the takeaway here is that AudioTestKitchen, regardless of how they say they have captured the microphones, fundamentally, we are coming away with the same conclusions when using AudioTestKitchen as when we actually compare the microphones that I have at my house recording the exact same take of a vocal. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is if you agree with me, you're now free to go absolutely ham with AudioTestKitchen and trust your ears when you're listening on this site. Now, with that said, AudioTestKitchen has a lot of data. And it is actually pretty hard to pick out the good things from the bad things. So what I want to do is I want to equip you with some things that you could keep in mind when listening to these different microphones and using the site to kind of better inform yourself on which microphones interest you. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do an interesting comparison between two Sony microphones. So if you are familiar with the C800G, then you know this is a very iconic microphone. It is used for rap and hip hop all across the globe. Extremely common microphone for top hits. It is also $10,000, which means that most people that are not crazy professionals don't have one of these. The Sony C100 is a lot more acquirable for people that have a decent chunk of money to spend, but still want to get a nice mic. And a lot of people have kind of called the C100 a budget C800G. I personally don't think it is. It sounds very different from the C800G. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a blind comparison between these to see if I could pick it out. Because I am saying, I'm claiming that some people say it's a cheaper version of C800G, but I'm saying no, it's not. It sounds very different. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to same vocal that we were listening to before. I'm going to listen to the beginning of it, and we're going to go into blind mode, which is going to shuffle the microphones, and we're going to listen to these, and I'm going to pick out which one is the C100. And this is because I've heard the C800G and C100 in different comparisons, so I know which one sounds like which.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. We make. Who won test?
This one sounds super sharp and sounds like it has a very weird dip.
Who won test?
This one just sounds like it has presence. This is 100% the C899G. This is the C800G for sure. So I'm going to submit that note there, and then C100, submit the note there, and then we will go out of blind mode. And hold on, keep new order, hold the phone. Oh, it's funny. I got it dead on. That's because if we go to the frequency response graph, the C800G has presence. It sounds bright, but it sounds bright in a way that has presence. The C100 sounds extremely sharp and shrill, because it has this huge peak followed by a huge dip, followed by another peak, followed by another dip. So it just sounds very weird. I do not like this microphone at all. I was looking at the C800G because everyone wants a C800G because it's like, it's one of the holy grail microphones along with the Telefunken C12 and ELA M251. So honestly, I didn't even find this comparison on AudioTestKitchen. There's some YouTube videos where you could listen to the two mics next to each other side by side where they did comparisons, and you could hear the exact same thing. But what AudioTestKitchen does is it lets you actually compare the two microphones with a frequency graph to see why you were hearing the things that you were hearing. So once again, you shouldn't assume that a frequency response graph is going to tell you what a microphone will sound like, but you can use it to help explain the differences that you hear. So really C800G, not really like C100. But we're going to find something interesting in a second. First, I want to show you what a microphone looks like if it has a very identifiably disconcerting frequency response graph. So let's pull up the old C214. So the C414 is a both of the variants of it are very iconic microphones in a sense. Like there's a lot of C414s. C214 is, what people think of when they think of a budget version of this. Once again, budget compared to real deal, but this time we're looking at $400 versus $1,000. So let's look at the C214. We're not going to even listen to this one. We're just going to go straight to the frequency response graph. And what the heck is that? Like, how does this, like, you could just look at this frequency response graph and go, that's pretty weird. I don't know if I would ever want a mic like that. You don't even have to listen to it in some of these cases just because it's so off the walls. Let's go with another. I think there's a blue microphone, the Blue Spark. Yes. Blue Spark is a $200 microphone. This is exactly why AudioTestKitchen is so amazing. A lot of people look at mics in the $100, $200, $300 range because that's all they can afford. Blue Spark fits in there. Blue is a name a lot of people are familiar with. This is another microphone that we just have to go to the frequency response graph to know we really don't want that microphone. Because what on earth is this thing doing? It's got a huge dip. It's got a boost around like 5K, but then it cuts around 10K. So you get like no air up until like this frequency. It's very bizarre. Like actually, let's actually listen to this one because this one's pretty bizarre sounding.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. We make.
It sounds so horribly shrill. It's weird. But this is what's great about AudioTestKitchen. Like, sure, I'm not trying to bash Blue, but it's great to be able to listen to a mic before you commit to spending $200 on it. So very cool things that we're seeing here. But like we've kind of done is we've seen so far C800G. We have this one. And then we have like cheap options and we're just knocking out things that we really don't want. We're finding stuff that we don't like, and that's not ideal. So I bet you're wondering why I picked the Sontronics STC2. And I'm going to show you exactly why I picked that mic for one of the mics that I personally owned because of AudioTestKitchen, and I demonstrated today in the comparison. So let me go back to the cupboard where I stashed away my Sontronics STC2, and let's look at this one. Now, the frequency response graph is going to start to get pretty cluttered, so we're going to pull some of these mics off in a second. But yeah, things are really cluttered, kind of hard to see what's going on. So let's delete these one by one because we don't ever want to see those mics again. They sound weird. They look weird. Hold on. Wait a minute. Everyone said the C100 was a budget C800G. I disagreed. And now what we're seeing is this Sontronics STC2 is almost like a copy of the C800G. It follows it remarkably well. And this mic is $279. I think I actually had to spend around like $320 or something. So it's a little bit more, but point still stands. Hold on. These frequency response graphs look very similar, but does that mean anything? Well, let's take a listen because we actually can do that.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. Who won test? We licking off shots in the. Who won test? We licking off shots. Who won test? We licking off shots in. Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city and you running your lip. I'm about to make a call, get the news van out. Explain the trick.
Okay, let's be completely honest about this. They don't sound the same. You could tell right here, there is a slight difference between the two. The STC2 sounds a little bit peakier in the high end. Like it sounds like there's some peaks in the frequency response graph that we can see, which makes sense. And it sounds like those are poking out certain frequencies more than others. But at the same time, it also doesn't sound quite as bright as a C800G, but it's very subtle. And we could see that the difference between these two, just looking at the little nifty little tooltip that we have here, there is like a close to 1 dB difference. It's very subtle between these two microphones. It becomes a little bit more drastic here where we have something more like a little bit over 2 dB difference, but point still stands. They're very similar mics, and this one is only $300. In fact, this microphone is way closer to the C800G than the C100 is. All the people that were like, yeah, if you like C800G, you'll like the C100 because it's a very similar mic. Really, it isn't. It does have that significant high frequency peak, but it's a very different characteristic to it. So if you want a C800G, maybe look at a Sontronics STC2. But the rabbit hole just keeps going further and further, folks. There's a lot of modeling microphones out there that attempt to model the C800G. So if I just search 800, we could look at a bunch of different microphones that provide models for the C800G. Slate has 2 of them. Townsend Labs has 2 of them. Gauge has 1. Antelope Audio has 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to stash that back in our cupboard, and we're going to start looking at how clones pan out. So we're going to get the 2 cheapest ones because that's what I'm sure most of you guys are interested in. And then we'll look at the Slate one first, and then we'll get Townsend Labs last because they're the most interesting. Okay, there's a lot of graphs, but let's just sort through them one by one. You could do this yourself. don't think that I have to be walking you through this. I'm just kind of showing you different ways to use this tool. So Sony C800G here, Sontronics SEC2 here, very similar microphones. Antelope Audio. It's kind of close-ish, but let's listen to it.
We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't.
It sounds shrill. There's something about this that just sounds shrill. It doesn't sound like smooth and bright. It sounds shrill. I don't know why. And we could look at this and we could try to, guess maybe it's here. Maybe it's because these very drastic peaks that are more drastic than what we are seeing with the SEC2. But fundamentally, it's kind of shrill. Doesn't really, hit well. Let's look at the gauge. Okay, I don't know what they were doing with that, but let's take a listen.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be.
All the presence is gone. Actually, that makes sense. Because 5K is like your presence area, and it doesn't just not have that sort of, nice little presence boost. It actually has a dip that cuts out quite a bit of presence there. That's a 3.5 dB dip in the presence region. Weird choice. This is like if somebody heard a C800G and tried to remake it themselves as opposed to trying to model it. This one was definitely much closer, but it just sounded kind of off. Slate. This one, I have this as well. I think they missed the mark the most in terms of, probably what we're going to hear from tone, but it does not have weird peaks. So it's a little bit more balanced of an approach, but I don't suspect they'll sound the same because there's a huge difference right here. So this is going to sound like, and it's also brighter than the C800G. So it's going to sound like really bright and upfront in a way that's different.
Second young buck in the West. We make believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be second young buck in the presence of this.
Yeah, it just kind of sounds sibilant. That's a perfect word for it. It sounds very sharp, not particularly pleasing, and you really do notice that the presence kind of immediately drags into the high frequency content that's just sharp. Because we're not having that nice little, a slight boost and then a boost in the high frequency air. We're kind of just seeing like this gradual increase, which makes the mic sound kind of shrill because we don't have a distinction between the air and the presence.
Believers out the best. Lay the week to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit.
Now, with that said, it's also the least objectionable to me. I think like the Antelope just sounded kind of weird. The gauge, I feel like missed the mark. The Slate, it wasn't the same tone, but it actually feels like a usable microphone. So you can kind of see we're like going, kind of in order of price almost. The Antelope is a little bit of an oddball because it's very close from a tone perspective, but it just sounds kind of weird, like they didn't have great modeling technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to stash these guys and leave the Slate in here. Because if you have looked into the Slate, you might have come across the, sorry, it's a little bit buggy here. Okay, cool. You might have heard of the Townsend Labs Sphere. And there's also multiple models. So we'll pull up the other Slate and then we'll pull up one of the Townsend Sphere ones. Just because the instant we select this one, you will see why I said is the most interesting case. So C800G, that one, Townsend Labs Sphere. Ooh, that is almost dead on. That is almost dead on. Like there's a little bit of more of a presence boost, but ooh, boy, that's close. And that's why I said this one's the most interesting, because this doesn't go to show that things can't be modeled well. It just goes to show that some models are better than others. And price does seem to determine that, unfortunately. So Townsend Labs Sphere, it seems very close. Let's take a listen.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come from my city.
It's got a little more presence than the C800G, but honestly, I think I like that. Like, I actually think I like this a little bit more than the C800G. So that's interesting. Now, the reason I brought in the FG800M is because Slate does have two models of the C800G. And this one is closer than this one. So I don't remember. They say one of them's modern, one of them's vintage. It doesn't matter. This one is kind of closer. But even though it's kind of closer, we still have that problem with the presence getting dragged into the high frequency and just like a upward slope, so that we're going to be missing this sort of dip that provides that distinction between presence and high frequency air. So let's take a listen to this. It's going to be closer to the C800G, but it's still going to have that kind of lack of distinction between those two different regions.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the presence of this. Don't even come.
See, it still just sounds sibilant. It doesn't, like, the C800G has this clarity to it that both the Sontronics and the Townsend Labs Sphere replicate extremely well. Like the Townsend Labs Sphere, if you have $1,500 to give, like, this model right here, how accurate it is compared to the C800G. Let's stash that one and get the other model, just so that we could see both. This is our last C800G model, and you can see, yeah, it's a slightly different. It's going to be much closer to the C800G in that presence region. It doesn't have a slight boost like it did before. Oops, I'm clicking the wrong ones, but you get the idea. So like, there's the only difference is like right here and right here. There's a very slight difference. But that could be broken down to different microphones, because two different models of the same microphone, Townsend got very slight nuanced differences. Slate kind of just got weirdly different differences.
Who won test? We licking off shots in the west. We make believers out the best. Lay the weak to rest. This Southern California ain't no place like this. And after stuff y'all doing, we created the shit. So don't be sagging, young buck, in the
Okay, so I did spend a lot of time listening to those, but you kind of get the idea. If you want something that clones a microphone, based on what I've seen from AudioTestKitchen, your best bet is going to be the Townsend Labs Sphere. Now, it's not to say that Slate's microphones are bad. They just don't really accurately replicate the real C800G to the point to where I would trust the rest of their models for some of the other more vintage microphones. And I think this gets interesting. I'm going to leave this as homework for you. Dig into the U47 clones. What you'll see if you start to compare the U47 versus the various clones is the U47 doesn't really have a good clone in a sense. Like, you can't just get a modeling mic and then slap the U47 mode on and expect it to sound anything like a U47, or a modern U47. I think this is modern. I don't think this is vintage. I think AudioTestKitchen, hopefully correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, AudioTestKitchen. But I think what they use is all modern variants of the microphones. So vintage stuff is not really captured by this site. It's all the modern variants. So yeah, a little bit of a long rabbit hole to say, modeling microphones are interesting. The Slate ML1, I think, is very viable. It has a bunch of different models that sound okay. But I think it's kind of a little bit more of quantity over quality, but decent quality. Whereas the Townsend Labs Sphere, it's something that I feel like I can trust more now that I've gotten a chance to listen to it, you know? And all in all, like, my kind of takeaways from owning the Slate ML1 is exactly that. Like, they sound like there's a lot of different options for your sound, but none of them are things that, like, I really lock in and go, oh yeah, that sounds amazing. And I really want to just use that on like every time I'm recording this vocal. I hope this doesn't answer all your questions, but instead inspires you to dig into this site and learn what you can. Try out different microphones. Figure out which ones have like the sounds that you're looking for. Like if you like bright microphones, figure out which microphones are bright in a way that you appreciate and you feel can cut through a mix. That's why they give you so many different options for different things to listen to, whether it's a full track or bass or a vocal or piano or guitar. You could try out all these different things on different sources And so you could better understand the tone of a microphone. That's the important thing. It's not whether or not there will be a harsh peak for a particular vocalist. It's about understanding the tone of a microphone. Like the exact same way a guitar has a tone. You can't play a guitar wrong for the tone it has, but you can pick a guitar for the tone it has, right? So please, please, please check out this site. And the reason I'm begging you to check out this site so much is not because I'm sponsored. It's because I think this site is amazing. And I also think that the only way this site will continue to exist is if people continue to use it and continue to spread it. And also, like, you know, express your feedback back to the creators. Like, there is a tab right here for feedback. If you run into bugs, report the bugs. If there are things that you think were really cool about the site, report them here. Like, tell them, like, hey, it'd be awesome if we could do this. Like, have some sort of ability to, like, personally, one of the things I suggested was it'd be awesome if we could click a microphone in this list and see a frequency response graph. Mostly because digging through microphones here, when you have like a whole bunch of them and swapping them in and out just to look at the frequency response, is kind of tedious. And I tend to use a frequency response as an indicator for whether or not I should, you know, dig in and really audition a mic, because like we kind of noticed, things like the AKG 214, C214, you know, you just have to see it to be like, yeah, I can just look at that microphone and understand that I'm not particularly interested in it. So I think that would be a handy thing to have. So I suggested it to them. And similarly, I suggest that you like enable cookies, create an account, and because some of those things are used to better understand how people are using the site and what things are useful to people and what things are frequently used. Like, for example, if you flip to the cart tab, there's ways, I presume, to buy, to find where to buy microphones. And if they're finding that not a lot of people are clicking this, then they could better improve some sort of ways for people to get redirected to purchase the microphones that they want. And the reason this is relevant is because things like this are how sites like this are funded. Like advertising and referrals are what keep sites like this afloat. And I think, like, I really want to see this site continue to thrive. I also would like to see a whole bunch of new mics added to this site. Like, I think the more mics that people have, like the AT2020 and the Blue Yeti, those mics are extremely popular. And if people have microphones like that, they can listen to their experience with their microphone on this site and go, huh, that matches my understanding of the tone of this microphone. And the only way they could do that is if there's enough people that are interested in the site to warrant adding more microphones. Because trust me, if you look into their process for adding for recording these microphones, capturing these microphones, it is no easy feat. It is a lot of work to just add a single microphone, and it's extremely expensive from a time perspective and a resource perspective. So they really need all the help they can get in terms of publicity and attention. Now, as some closing remarks for this video, I do kind of want to highlight a few things I found after a ton of time digging, just because there's so many mics you can compare them against. It's kind of hard. So I'm just going to ramble for a little bit longer and show you some things I found. The Sontronics STC2 is one of the things that I found that I think is crazy, because for $300, getting something that sounds remarkably close to a C800G is just insane. So I wanted to buy one of those before I made this video to test myself, and also to make sure that it doesn't get out of stock before I could buy one. So, so I have a Sontronics STC2, and I could vouch for it. I have not used it a ton. I will save a review for that microphone for a later time when I've used it more. But based on, you know, what I've heard of a C800G, the comparisons I've seen here, the experiences that I've had with comparing microphones and being able to trust the results I'm getting from AudioTestKitchen, this was one of the microphones that I picked to buy based on just using the site alone. So very, very cool microphone. I suggest you check it out. I don't necessarily suggest that you just assume it is a C800G and buy it because of that. Please take a listen for yourself. Another fun thing that I found is ye old, actually it's in my cupboard. Let me just move those there, I guess. The ye old Rode NT1A. I was always skeptical about this microphone because a lot of people said, oh yeah, it's just kind of like a harsh Chinese, you know, bright microphone. That characteristic is actually pretty well represented in this set of microphones. You can find some MXL microphones, like, let me actually pull one up just to kind of illustrate this. Perfect. 2006. MXL 2006. Crazy bright peak. And it's not just a peak at 10K. it's a peak at 13K, which is where it starts to get to the point to where it's like really bright air. 2003 is a similar story. It's not quite as drastic, but it's that same sort of thing where you have like a little bit of presence, but then it kind of like dips in the traditional air and starts to get to like the hissy part of the air. This part is hard to mix. It doesn't cut through a mix as well as 10K, which is why these microphones, you know, kind of get classified in that. But anyway, I'm kind of going on a rant because I want to talk to you about the NT1A. It's not actually as bright as some of these other microphones. And interestingly, let me throw these back in the cupboard. The NT1A resembles some very iconic microphones that I would like to point out in a way that none of the other microphones on this list really do. So let's look at the C12. Telefunken C12. Telefunken C12, $8,000. Rode NT1A, extremely popular microphone. I'm sure a lot of great tracks have been made with it. They just might not have tons of credits to the NT1A. But oh, goodness gracious. Goodness gracious, that is really darn close. So when I saw this, I was actually looking for C12 clones, and I was kind of digging through the modeling mics, the replica mics, and I couldn't find anything that actually really like mirrored the C12. NT1A, surprisingly enough, that microphone that a lot of people have said, yeah, get the NT1, not the NT1A, because the NT1 is much smoother and doesn't sound as harsh and like, you know, Chinese capsule-y cheap microphone. Sorry, boys. It actually sounds extremely similar to the C12. So if you're a C12 fan, then you might want to check out the NT1A again. Now, you know, once again, listen to these microphones. Like you'd obviously need a low shelf boost to the NT1A to get it close to a C12 with like that huge, or I guess it's not that big, but it's like a 2.5 dB boost in the low end. But listen to this yourself. If you don't believe me, frequency response graphs, once again, don't depend on them. Use your ears. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that, but check this out for yourself. Cool mic. If you have the NT1A, maybe you don't need to upgrade because you have a C12 basically. I wanted to highlight one more microphone before I go, and that is if you have heard of the Manley Reference C. Let's pull this open. Manley. This is a pretty expensive microphone. It's $3,000, so a little bit more acquirable. But then we have a Electronics SE2200 and the SE Electronics. That's close. And the SE Electronics SE2200 is shockingly close to a Manley Reference cardioid. So you get a little bit more presence boost, and the high frequency content is shifted up a little bit. But if you like the Manley Reference C, but you can't afford it, 1/10 the cost, SE Electronics SE2200. I don't own this microphone, to be completely transparent. Once again, take a listen to this, see if this interests you. Another, you know, alternative to a very expensive microphone. And yeah, there's a lot of other mics here that you could dig into and find interesting stuff. But two of the coolest ones for me were the NT1A and the Sontronics SEC2. I rejected this mic for a long time because I just believed everybody saying, you know, like a lot of people said it was a great mic, but the same amount of people also said it was like a harsh, bright mic that you really don't want because it's like a cheap Chinese mic. So I now own one, as you can see by the fact that I was demonstrating it earlier. But yeah, it just goes to show that you can't exactly trust everything you hear on the internet, and maybe you should actually listen to the mics yourself. So this video is probably at the half-hour mark, which isn't ideal, but there's a lot I wanted to pack in here because there's a lot that you could learn. And I sincerely do hope that you check this out. Please, if you find this website useful, tell the Audio Test Kitchen folks, you know, share it on social media, tell other people about it. And if you have mics that are on this list, please do the exact same thing I did. Make a video showing your comparison between your mics and Audio Test Kitchen and see for yourself, or to, you know, further illustrate this to more people, that the way that they are presenting microphones is fair, and it really helps you understand the characteristics of a microphone. So thank you for listening to my rambling. Hopefully this was helpful. That's all I got for you today. And if you like this video, please share it, not because I care about people viewing this video, I really don't, but because I want more people to use Audio Test Kitchen and share it around. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.